Everyone thought the war hero was gone for good, until his old K-9 partner did something no one expected. Scout didn't just sit beside Walter's hospital bed. He howled at the machines, then pawed at his chest, just minutes before a life-changing discovery. What did the dog sense that the doctors didn't? If this moment gave you chills, drop a paw prints in the comments and hit subscribe for more true stories that prove loyalty never dies. Clearbrook, Maine, greeted November with the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. The wind off Mirror Lake carried the scent of pine and distant wood smoke, while the sun had long since retreated behind thick gray clouds. It was the kind of afternoon where the streets stood quiet and the town's aging weather vanes creaked on rooftops like groaning memories. Inside Clearbrook Regional Hospital, room 214 lay cloaked in unnatural stillness, save for the rhythmic hiss and click of a ventilator. Machines blinked in quiet precision, tracing each fragile breath of the man in the bed, Walter Grayson. Walter had once filled rooms with his presence. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-60s, with sharp steel-blue eyes that missed nothing and a voice like split timber. His face, though now slack and pale, still bore the marks of service. An old scar cutting across his right brow, a silver mustache that had defied age, and weathered hands that had built and rebuilt everything from radios to relationships. He had been a decorated Army Field Tech Sergeant, serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. His unit had once dubbed him the Anchor, not just for his stability in chaos, but for the way he pulled others back when they drifted too close to hopelessness. Now he was still, too still. Cassie Grayson stood beside the bed, arms crossed, her posture a brittle echo of strength. At 32, she was tall and wiry, with auburn hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. Her green eyes, normally bright with curiosity and dry wit, now looked sunken with guilt. She wore a thick cable-knit sweater that hung loose over her frame, as if she'd forgotten how to eat properly since the incident. Cassie was a fifth-grade teacher at Clearbrook Elementary, known by her students as Ms. G, strict, brilliant, and oddly funny. But her closeness with children masked something deeper, a lifelong fear of becoming emotionally distant like her father had been after returning from war. For years, she'd kept him at arm's length, never quite forgiving him for the silence that had clouded her teenage years. And now, she was terrified she'd never get the chance to tell him that she'd finally understood. Beside Walter's bed lay a faded red-and-black dog blanket. Curled atop, it was Scout. Scout was a 12-year-old Labrador Retriever mix with a peppered black coat, graying more around the muzzle and chest. His body had grown lean with age, and a slight limp remained from a hip injury sustained during a building collapse in Mosul. But his eyes, those amber eyes, were alert, watching everything, as if waiting for someone to give him a mission. Scout had been Walter's K-9 partner during his last tour, trained in both medical alert and search and rescue. After retirement, the dog had refused to leave Walter's side. Wherever Walter went, grocery store, hardware shop, town meetings, Scout followed, wearing a frayed tactical vest with the embroidered patch. Grayson Unit, Semper Vigilance. Now that same dog lay stone still, head resting on his front paws, his tail unmoving. But his gaze never left Walter's face. The door creaked open. A woman in her 50s entered, short and broad-shouldered with a kind face and tired eyes behind smudged glasses. This was Nurse Martha Keeley, a Clearbrook native who'd worked in the ICU for 20 years. She carried a clipboard in one hand and a steaming paper cup in the other. "I brought you some coffee, Cassie," Martha said gently. "It's the kind you like. Cinnamon hazelnut." Cassie accepted it with a small nod, her fingers brushing Martha's in a silent thank you. "No change?" she asked, though the answer hung in the air like the hospital's antiseptic scent. "Matzesite." "I'm sorry, Han," still non-responsive. "Dr. Lewis will come by at 6. He wants to talk with you and the administrator about options." Cassie flinched. 72 hours? She whispered. Martha said nothing, just gave a small, sorrowful nod. Scout rose to his feet, then, slowly, stiffly, he padded over to the side of the bed, placed both front paws on the mattress, and nudged Walter's hand with his nose. Cassie turned. He's been doing that all day, she murmured. Martha frowned. Really? Yeah, not just that. Last night, he whined until I checked the IVs. I thought he needed to go outside, but everything was fine. Scout let out a soft whimper and then laid his head gently on Walter's chest, exactly above the heart. Cassie swallowed hard. Martha crouched to his level, placing a hand on his shoulder. You missing your partner, boy? Scout didn't move, but his breathing deepened. It was almost meditative, as if syncing with the slow mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. Cassie stood frozen, watching them. Her father, broken but not gone, and this old dog who refused to believe what the machines were saying. She reached out and stroked Walter's hand. Dad, she said, voice cracking, I'm sorry. I should have come sooner. I should have said more. She paused. Scout still thinks you're in there. The silence returned, heavy and aching. Outside, a snowflake hit the window, followed by another. Soon the entire pane was peppered with them, soft, relentless. Cassie turned to Scout, who was now sitting upright, ears half-cocked. If he's right, she whispered, don't give up. Scout let out a low sound, not a bark, not a whine. Something in between, something almost knowing. Martha watched quietly, a crease forming between her brows. I've seen a lot in this hospital, she said after a while. But sometimes these animals know things we don't. Cassie looked up, startled. What do you mean? I don't know, Martha said honestly, but maybe don't make any decisions tonight. The overhead monitor beeped once, just a little faster than before. No one spoke, but Scout didn't take his eyes off Walter. The morning in Clearbrook arrived with a reluctant sun peeking through frost-bitten clouds, casting a pale amber glow over the sleepy town. Snow dusted the sidewalks like powdered sugar, melting slowly where it met the warmth of early footsteps. But within the walls of Clearbrook Regional Hospital, time remained unmoved. In room 214, the soft rhythm of the ventilator continued its mechanical vigil. Cassie sat curled in a stiff plastic chair beside her father's bed, her legs drawn up beneath her sweater. Her coffee had long gone cold on the tray beside her. She hadn't slept more than a handful of hours in the last 2 days, but rest felt both impossible and irrelevant. Scout was already awake. The old Labrador Mix sat alert on his blanket, his amber eyes fixated on Walter with an intensity that had not wavered since the night before. He had begun a new behavior, soft, persistent whining. Not loud, not distressed, but pointed, deliberate. It happened whenever he placed his muzzle against Walter's hand and didn't receive a response. Cassie watched in silence as Scout repeated the motion again. Nose to hand, whine, ears flicked back, as if listening for something no one else could hear. Dad, Cassie whispered. Her voice was scratchy from disuse. If you can hear him, if you're trying to come back. She trailed off, ashamed of how foolish it sounded. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened slowly, and a tall woman stepped inside. Good morning, Cassie, said the woman softly. She was in her late 40s, with long ash-blonde hair tied into a thick braid. Her face bore the confident calm of someone used to stress, but faint crow's feet and tired eyes betrayed a weariness behind the professionalism. She wore a tailored navy blouse beneath a gray fleece jacket with the hospital's crest stitched above the heart. This was Dr. Ellen Price, the hospital's director of patient support services. She had once worked as a trauma psychologist before transitioning to patient-family liaison work. Known for her calm demeanor and piercing intuition, she was the type of person who could de-escalate a family crisis with nothing but a few carefully chosen words. Cassie nodded stiffly. Hi, I wasn't expecting anyone yet. I know. I just wanted to check in before the doctors start rounds, Ellen said, glancing at Walter and then at Scout. Has there been any change? Cassie hesitated. Not in the machines. But Scout, he's acting strange. He keeps pressing his nose against Dad's hand and whining. Ellen crouched down slowly, meeting Scout's eyes. Hey, soldier, she said gently, reaching out with a flat hand. Scout allowed her to touch his head, but didn't break his gaze from Walter. Has he done that before? She asked. Not like this, Cassie admitted. He's always been quiet. But now, it's like he's trying to tell us something. Ellen stood and placed a comforting hand on Cassie's shoulder. You know, it's not unheard of. Animals, especially ones trained like Scout, can pick up on things we can't measure. Cassie looked up, hope flaring for a moment. You believe that? I believe in patterns, Ellen said simply. And I believe you should trust your gut. If you feel something's off or not off, you speak up. Cassie nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of those words. As Ellen turned to leave, she added, by the way, your principal called again. I'll let them know you're still here. Cassie's face darkened. Thanks. Later that afternoon, Cassie sat outside on a concrete bench in the hospital courtyard. The air was brisk, the wind carrying the smell of pine and the faint burn of wood smoke from someone's chimney down the road. Scout sat beside her, pressed tightly against her leg for warmth. She pulled out her phone and stared at the text from Principal Dean Hallbrook. Cassie, we support you fully, but your students are confused. You've missed 9 days. Consider taking the extended leave we discussed. You need time to heal. Dean was a no-nonsense man in his early 60s, with silver hair, horn-rimmed glasses, and the social tact of a bulldozer. Though he meant well, his way of caring often came across as clinical and cold. He had once lost his wife to cancer, and ever since viewed grief through a procedural lens, something to be managed, filed, and buried. Cassie sighed and typed a short reply. Still here. Don't want to leave. We'll send subplans by tonight. She put the phone away and stared up at the sky, its clouds shifting like thoughts too large to hold. I'm not leaving you, Dad, she murmured. Teaching's all I've got, but so are you. That evening, Cassie was back in room 214, sorting through a weathered box of old photographs her aunt had dropped off that morning. Most were bent at the corners, faded from time. Some showed Walter in uniform, standing in desert sand with Scout at his side. Others were of a younger Cassie, gap-toothed and freckled, riding on his shoulders at a county fair. She smiled faintly, brushing her thumb over one photo of her father kneeling beside Scout, both of them soaked in mud and grinning like fools. The note on the back read, Basra, 2008, after the water rescue. Her eyes flicked to Scout. He was now dozing lightly, his tail twitching in sleep. You always knew, didn't you? She whispered. When I was little, when I had that asthma attack and no one knew, you barked until Dad came running. He told me that story a dozen times. Scout's ear flicked as if in reply. She turned to Walter. He told me that you didn't trust the monitors. You always trusted Scout first. The machines beeped steadily beside her, indifferent. But her heart beat faster. A nurse entered quietly. Jamie Ellis, mid-20s, cheerful in the way only night shift nurses could manage. She had a round face, curly brown hair pulled into a high bun, and wore rainbow-colored sneakers beneath her scrubs. Vitals steady, Jamie said after checking the monitors. Let me know if you need anything. As she turned to go, Cassie asked, do you believe dogs can sense life, even when machines say otherwise? Jamie blinked, then grinned. I've seen a therapy cat refuse to leave a patient's bed until 10 minutes before they coded. So yeah, I do. Cassie sat in silence long after she left. Scout stood. He walked to Walter's bedside again. This time, instead of nudging his hand, he gently licked the back of it. Cassie's breath caught. Walter's fingers twitched. She wasn't sure if she imagined it. She looked at the monitors. Nothing had changed, but the hand had moved. She knew it. Scout let out a soft sound, low, steady, resolute. Cassie stood, heart pounding. Dad. No response, but it didn't matter. She had seen it. Something was still there. She stepped closer, placed her hand over Walter's, and whispered, I'm here. We're not done yet. The air inside Clearbrook Regional had turned oddly warm that morning, the kind of artificial heat that clung to skin and made everything feel more suffocating than comforting. Outside, a fine mist blanketed the sidewalks like steam rising from a silent pond, blurring the outlines of trees and street lamps. The fog had crept in from the lake and hung stubbornly over the town, as if refusing to let anyone see too far ahead. Inside room 214, Scout was restless. The old dog paced in tight circles beside Walter's bed, his nails clicking rhythmically against the linoleum floor. Every few steps, he would stop, placed his front paws against the base of the ventilator, and whined, a soft, low sound that made the skin on Cassie's arms prickle. Cassie sat hunched beside the bed, her hands buried deep inside the sleeves of her sweater. Her eyes were red-rimmed, not from crying, but from lack of sleep and endless scanning of her father's monitors. Every beep, every pulse, every number felt like a language she was slowly, desperately trying to learn. She'd seen his fingers twitch the night before. Not a spasm, not an involuntary tremor. It had been deliberate, weak but real. Scout had responded to it too. That meant something. A voice drifted into the hallway. Cassie stood quickly, cracked the door open a few inches, and listened. Two figures stood near the nurses' station down the hall. One was Dr. Lewis Godfrey, the hospital's chief medical officer. In his early 60s, Dr. Godfrey was a tall, rail-thin man with a bald crown and a trimmed gray beard. He walked with a stiff gait and carried himself with a detached, clinical efficiency. To patients, he came off as cold. To his staff, merely overstretched. His belief in statistical probabilities often overshadowed his regard for outliers. Beside him stood Nurse Clara Ruiz, one of the ICU's senior nurses. Clara was a short woman with a sharp face and expressive eyes that rarely missed anything. She had a reputation for blunt honesty and fierce advocacy when it came to patient care. Her black hair was pulled into a tight bun, and she carried a clipboard tucked under one arm like a shield. "I'm just saying," Clara said, her voice low but insistent, "the dog's behavior is too specific. He's not just whining or pacing. He's reacting to the equipment. That's not random." Godfrey exhaled through his nose. "Clara, I respect your instincts, but we cannot allow emotional projection to drive treatment. The EEG shows no consistent brain activity above baseline. He's in a vegetative state. We have protocols for this." "I know the protocols," Clara snapped, "but I've also seen patients dismissed too early. I'm asking for additional scans." "That's it, and I'm saying no," Godfrey replied, his voice like ice over steel. "We are not allocating limited resources to chase shadows. If the family requests it officially, we'll discuss. Until then, this case follows standard procedure." Clara looked ready to argue further, but a call on the intercom interrupted them. She turned away without another word. Cassie closed the door softly and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She had heard enough. Scout whined again, now crouched by Walter's foreline. He sniffed at the tubing and let out a frustrated huff, then scratched at the base of the forestand with his paw. Cassie knelt beside him. "What are you trying to tell me, boy?" Scout looked at her, ears perked, body tense. Then he moved back to Walter's side, rested his head near his shoulder, and let out a long, mournful exhale. That was the final push. Cassie grabbed her tote bag from the chair and strode down the hall, stopping at the front desk. Behind the counter sat Miriam Hawk, the daytime admin coordinator. In her late 40s, Miriam had a commanding presence, a tall woman with coiled red hair and a booming voice when she needed it. Today, however, she seemed distracted, sipping coffee and typing slowly on her keyboard. "I need my father's medical file," Cassie said. Miriam blinked. "I'm sorry. My dad, Walter Grayson. I want to see his file. Notes, scans, treatment plans." Miriam adjusted her glasses. "You'd need written permission from his medical proxy for that." "I'm his proxy." Miriam paused, checked her monitor, and nodded slowly. "One moment." A few minutes later, Cassie sat at a side table in the visitor's lounge with a printout of Walter's recent EEGs, imaging scans, and physician reports. She spread them out in front of her like puzzle pieces. None of it made sense to her, jargon, graphs, numbers. But what she did see was consistency. No updates since 2 days ago. No new testing scheduled. Nothing about behavioral observations. Nothing about Scout. A sudden voice interrupted her focus. "You won't find what you're looking for in those pages." Cassie looked up. A man stood nearby with a badge clipped to his belt. Dr. Everett Lane, a neurologist who'd only recently transferred to Clearbrook. He was in his early 40s, lean, with dark blonde hair, a slightly scruffy beard, and thoughtful eyes that studied before they judged. He wore a rumpled lab coat over a flannel shirt, clearly not one for appearances. "I'm sorry," Cassie said cautiously. Do I know you? Probably not, he replied, extending a hand. Dr. Lane, I just started here last week. I specialize in post-trauma neuroactivity. He nodded toward the papers. I saw your dad's name on the logs, and I noticed the lack of progress updates. Cassie tensed. He hasn't shown signs of recovery, or so they say. But you're not convinced, he said, taking a seat opposite her. No, she said firmly, because Scout, his dog, has been responding to something. He noticed when Dad's finger moved. He reacts to the machines. He acts like Walter is still in there. Lane tapped a finger on the printout. Dogs trained in medical alert are more reliable than some monitors. Honestly, they can detect shifts in hormones, breathing, even changes in body chemistry before our equipment does. Cassie stared at him. You believe me? I believe that medicine still has blind spots, he said, and I'm willing to look closer. She exhaled slowly, the weight of her own doubts lifting slightly. I need your help, she said. Will you reevaluate him? I can review the EEGs myself, Lane nodded. Maybe run a more sensitive test, but it'll ruffle feathers. I don't care. Then neither do I. Back in room 214, Scout stirred as Cassie returned. She knelt beside him and whispered, Help is coming. Walter remained unmoving, but Scout gave a single, resolute thump of his tail against the floor. And for the first time in days, Cassie let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the machines weren't the final word. The clock on the wall read 2:37 a.m., but the halls of Clearbrook Regional Hospital had long since fallen into a hush broken only by the quiet hum of machines and the distant shuffle of overnight staff. Outside, the fog had thickened into a ghostly blanket that rolled in from the lake, dulling even the amber glow of the parking lot lamps. Inside room 214, the stillness cracked like glass. Scout began whining, not the soft, questioning sound of concern from earlier days, but a sharp, insistent cry. His paws scraped at the floor, claws tapping in a frantic rhythm. He rose, planted his front legs against the hospital bed, and let out a bark. Then another. The sound ricocheted down the quiet hallway. Cassie jolted awake from the cot by the window, heart racing. Scout! The dog didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Walter's face. He barked again, louder. His body trembled with focus, tail stiff, as if straining to pull a signal from a static-filled channel. Cassie jumped to her feet just as the door flung open. A man stood in the doorway, barefoot in sneakers, wearing navy blue scrubs and a wrinkled lab coat half-buttoned in haste. His sandy brown hair was tousled, and a pair of rectangular glasses slid halfway down his nose. Despite the hour, his hazel eyes were sharp with alertness. Dr. Logan Carter was the youngest neurologist on staff. 33, tall, lean, with the gentle curiosity of a scientist and the soul of a field medic. Raised on a small dairy farm in Vermont, Logan had worked ER shifts during med school and still bore the rural grit that made him both grounded and unpredictable. What's going on in here? He asked, stepping into the room. Cassie pointed to Scout. He woke me. He's acting like something's wrong or right. I don't know. Logan crouched beside Scout, who growled low and turned back to Walter. Then Walter's hand twitched. Just once, but enough to freeze the room. Logan stood quickly, eyes narrowing. Did he do that before? Yes, Cassie whispered, breath caught. But this time, it looked stronger. Without a word, Logan moved to the head of the bed and began checking Walter's pupil response with his penlight. Scout stepped back, but didn't leave. Cassie, he said calmly, go find Nurse Clara. Tell her I need the portable EEG. And hurry. Cassie hesitated. Will they allow that? I thought only Dr. Godfrey. I'm not asking for permission, Logan cut in. I'm taking responsibility. 10 minutes later, Clara arrived, pushing the equipment cart, her face tight but resolute. I swear if Godfrey finds out. He won't, Logan said, already attaching electrodes to Walter's temples. Not yet. Clara was still in her pale lavender scrubs, her long cardigan thrown over her shoulders. The lines on her face deepened with fatigue, but her movements were quick and confident. I'll monitor vitals, she said, pulling Scout gently back by his collar. "Let him stay close," Logan replied. "He may respond if something shifts." The machine powered up. For a moment, there was only static. Then small waves began dancing across the screen. Logan leaned in. Claire squinted. "Is that?" Logan nodded. "Low-level cortical response. Still inconsistent, but it's there. Temporal and parietal regions." Cassie felt her knees weaken. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," Logan said carefully, "he may not be as far gone as the baseline EEG suggested. This is minimal, but it's purposeful. There's electrical response to stimuli. That changes the discussion." By morning, the buzz had already begun. Dr. Godfrey had not been pleased. Logan received a formal reprimand and a closed-door lecture about chain of command, liability, and the dangers of encouraging emotional reasoning. But the data had been logged. A second opinion was now on file. Cassie found Logan leaning against the coffee machine in the break room hours later, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" she asked. He looked up, smiled wearily. "Still employed." "So yes. I heard about the report," she said. "Thank you." He shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. It's only a glimmer. But it's real." They sat across from each other at the small table beside the window. The gray daylight made everything inside look colder. "I needed that," Cassie admitted. "The proof. Even just a thread of it. Scout gave us that," Logan said. "Not me." Cassie chuckled softly. "He's always been that way. Dad said once that Scout could sense things before any human could. During a mission in Fallujah, Scout detected an IED under the sand seconds before Walter stepped forward. He's a remarkable dog," Logan said, then paused. "So are you, for holding on this long." Cassie didn't respond right away. Instead, her gaze drifted to the hallway. "My coworkers don't think so," she muttered. "Principal Hallbrook called again this morning. Said they might need to find someone permanent if I keep missing classes." Logan tilted his head. "You want to go back?" "I do, but I can't. Not until I know my dad's fate isn't sealed. Teaching's my constant, but right now, he needs me more than the classroom." "You're doing the right thing," Logan said. His voice was steady, but kind, the way people only spoke when they weren't trying to fix you, to stand beside you. Cassie smiled faintly. "You know, if we get through this, I might owe Scout a steak dinner." Logan grinned. "Make it two. I think he's earned it." That night, Cassie returned to room 214 to find Scout lying quietly beside Walter, one paw gently resting against her father's arm. The machines blinked their usual rhythm, but Cassie noticed a shift, subtle, but there. Walter's eyelids fluttered, as if caught in the threads of a dream. Cassie sat and reached for his hand, curling her fingers around his. "I'm still here, Dad," she whispered. "And I'm not giving up." Behind her, Scout lifted his head and exhaled a slow, steady breath. It wasn't over yet. The fog that had blanketed Clearbrook all week now hung heavier than ever, smothering the town in a damp stillness that seeped into bones and breath. Streetlights flickered dimly along Main Street, casting muted halos over snow-speckled sidewalks. From her place in the hospital lobby window, Cassie watched the headlights of early commuters cut weak paths through the haze, her fingers wrapped tightly around a paper cup of untouched tea. Room 214 had become her world, a capsule of tension, hope, and exhaustion. But this morning, she had a different mission, a decision. Behind her, the elevators opened with a muted chime. Dr. Logan Carter stepped out, carrying a black zippered case marked NeuroTrack XR in fading white letters. His face, normally open and quietly energetic, was pulled taut. The soft light revealed faint stubble on his chin and dark circles beneath his hazel eyes. He joined Cassie at the window, exhaling into the steam of her tea. "You sure about this?" he asked. Cassie looked up. Her jaw tightened, and her voice came firm. "Yes. No more secrets. No more waiting for permission." Logan nodded once, turned, and led the way back upstairs. Inside room 214, Scout lay at Walter's side, his head resting gently on the man's stomach. The machines beeped steadily, unchanged. But something in the air had shifted, something subtle. Cassie felt it in her chest, a hum just beneath her heartbeat. Logan set up the machine in silence. He was methodical, attaching the neuroelectrodes with expert precision, fingers working with the grace of muscle memory. Scout stirred as the equipment came online, his ears twitching, eyes alert. This wasn't just a standard EEG. It was an advanced neural response tracker, one designed to measure microstimuli, minute flickers of awareness often undetectable by conventional scans. Cassie sat beside her father, one hand on his, the other on Scout's shoulder. "All right," Logan said. "Let's begin." He tapped a few keys. A soft chime indicated recording had started. A screen flickered to life. For the first minute, nothing. Then, as Cassie leaned closer and spoke softly, "Dad, we're here. Scout's here. We're not leaving you." The graph pulsed. Logan inhaled sharply. "There. That's a neural spike." Cassie blinked. "So he heard me? Or responded to your voice?" Logan murmured. "There's recognition. It's faint but consistent." Scout let out a quiet whine and nudged Walter's hand. The line pulsed again. Cassie gasped. "It's stronger when Scout touches him." Logan stared at the screen. His presence is triggering something. Proximity to scent, familiarity, whatever it is, it's real. This isn't a reflex. They let the session run for 20 more minutes, during which multiple micro-reactions occurred, each coinciding with Scout's physical touch or Cassie's voice. Finally, Logan leaned back, breathless. This is enough to request intervention, at least a reassessment of his treatment plan. Later that morning, they stood before the hospital's medical board, a long rectangular table. 6 members, most in gray suits, a few in white coats. At the head sat Dr. Leonard Brigham, the hospital director, a man in his late 50s with thinning blonde hair, a soft face hardened by decades of policy work. Known for his neutrality and obsession with liability, Brigham rarely favored deviation from protocol. Cassie stood to Logan's left, shoulders squared despite the tight knot in her chest. Scout remained in the hallway, per hospital policy. "We're asking for continued life support," Logan said, projecting calm, "and targeted neurostimulation therapy based on the new results." Brigham steepled his fingers. "Dr. Carter, you conducted this test without clearance. With respect, I follow my clinical judgment based on evolving patient signs," Logan replied. "Your judgment goes against the consensus of 5 senior neurologists," Brigham said coldly. Cassie stepped forward. "Then maybe the consensus needs to be challenged. My father is showing signs of recognition. We saw it. We recorded it. And with the help of a dog, apparently," one board member muttered. "That dog," Cassie said sharply, "has done more for my father than anyone else here." There was a tense silence. Then another voice. Dr. Hannah Merrick, a pediatric surgeon with silver hair, pale skin, and kind eyes, spoke gently from the far side. "Is the evidence reproducible?" she asked Logan. "Yes," he said. "We recorded consistent reactions in response to sensory and emotional triggers. I can show you the data." Brigham hesitated. His gaze drifted between Logan and Cassie, measuring risk, optics, the potential media fallout of pulling life support from a veteran whose daughter had clear proof of awareness. Finally, he spoke. "You will submit a written request for reassessment," he said, "and pending review by 2 outside consultants, treatment will remain unchanged." Cassie exhaled. Logan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It was not a victory, but it was not defeat. Back in room 214, Scout perked up the moment Cassie returned. She dropped to her knees, threw her arms around his neck, and held him close. "You did it," she whispered into his fur. "You gave them something they couldn't ignore." Scout leaned into her, his body warm, strong, and steady as always. Logan stepped inside a moment later. "You still want to fight?" Cassie stood, wiping her eyes. "I've never been more certain." Outside the window, the fog finally began to lift. Pale sunlight broke through in long golden shards, touching Walter's bed, Cassie's face, and the loyal form of Scout curled at his feet. For the first time in weeks, the light felt real. The night pressed heavily on Clearbrook, cloaking the hospital in a hush as deep as snow. In room 214, every light had been dimmed except for the soft glow from the portable monitor, now connected directly to Walter Grayson's temple. The upgraded neural stimulator hummed in a steady rhythm, timed to patterns of sound and scent. Cassie had spent the last 4 hours speaking to her father in soft intervals, sometimes reading his old field journals aloud, other times simply sitting in silence with Scout curled beside her. Outside the window, the fog was finally gone. A sharp winter moon lit the frost-covered trees, revealing every brittle edge of pine needles and every crystalline blade of grass. At 4:14 a.m., the machine registered a change. A sudden burst of high-frequency neural activity blinked across the screen like a heartbeat skipping in relief. Cassie, half dozing in her chair, sat up straight. "Logan," she whispered. Dr. Logan Carter was asleep on a cot across the room, wrapped in a blanket, his hair tousled, jaw slack. He stirred at her voice, blinked twice, and sat up with a groggy grunt. "The monitor," she said, pointing. "It just jumped." He was on his feet in seconds. Scout lifted his head too, eyes already locked on Walter. Logan examined the screen, then slowly bent over Walter, flashing a penlight into his eyes. "Pupil dilation," he muttered. "Wait, Cassie. Look." Walter's left eyelid fluttered, then twitched again. The movement was weak, but unmistakably conscious. Then his brow furrowed, and with a low, crackling rasp, his lips parted. "SC Scout." Cassie gasped, stumbling forward, gripping the edge of the bed. "Dad!" Walter's eyes opened, sluggish and dazed, but alert enough to lock onto her face. And then to Scout. The old dog whined, wagging his tail in slow disbelief, then gently rose, placing his front paws on the mattress. His nose touched Walter's cheek like a blessing. Cassie's voice cracked. "You're back." Walter blinked slowly. Took long enough. Tears fell freely from her eyes, her whole body trembling. "You scare me." Walter managed to whisper. "You didn't give up." By morning, the entire hospital buzzed with the news. Walter Grayson, presumed irreversibly comatose, had spoken, opened his eyes, and reacted to voices and light. Dr. Leonard Brigham was the first from the board to visit, dressed sharply as always in a tailored charcoal gray suit. He stood stiffly at the foot of the bed, flanked by 2 new consultants brought in as neutral observers. His expression was unreadable, his words cautious. "This is remarkable," he said at last. "We'll review all protocol recommendations immediately." Cassie didn't respond. She was too busy watching her father sip water from a spoon, guided gently by Nurse Jenny Patel, a petite woman with dark hair, warm brown skin, and a soft, melodic voice. Known for her gentle way with long-term care patients, Jenny had tears in her eyes as she whispered, "You did good, Mr. Grayson. Real good." Walter tried to smile, then looked toward Scout. "He's the reason. Never left me." Over the following weeks, Walter's recovery progressed. Slowly, yes, but steadily. Physical therapy began 3 days after his awakening. Speech returned in fragments, then in full sentences. By Christmas, he was sitting upright, feeding himself, and chuckling softly whenever Scout would nudge his foot under the blankets. Outside of room 214, something else was shifting. Clearbrook Regional's approach to coma care began changing. Dr. Logan Carter, now a quiet hero within the hospital's ranks, was asked to help develop a new protocol for integrated sensory monitoring in long-term coma cases. A month later, the hospital installed 2 new NeuroTrack XR units, funded partially by an anonymous veterans organization that had read about Walter's case in the Clearbrook Times. Cassie, meanwhile, made a decision. It came one rainy afternoon in January, after her first visit to a support group in Portland. The group was small, just 6 people, but filled with quiet power. Caregivers, wives, husbands, daughters, all with someone they loved caught in the silence of coma. Cassie had been invited by Sarah Whitmore, a tall woman in her late 40s, all angles and nerves, with piercing blue eyes and a voice that quivered when she spoke about her brother's accident in Afghanistan. Sarah had lost hope, but not her fight. "Even if they never wake up," she told Cassie, "they're still worth sitting beside." Cassie drove home that night and drafted her resignation letter. Principal Hallbrook wasn't surprised. "I knew," he said gently during their final phone call. "You stayed longer than most would have." He was an austere man, all rules and routine, but Cassie noticed his voice soften as he added, "Let me know if you ever want to come back. We'll always have a classroom for you." Instead of returning to teaching, Cassie joined the Clearbrook Coma Care Coalition, helping other families navigate the fear, uncertainty, and flickers of hope that came with watching someone they loved drift between breath and absence. At her side always was Scout, and often Logan. What had started between them as cautious respect deepened through shared war rooms of sleepless nights and ethical battles. He wasn't flashy or particularly romantic, but he was steady, thoughtful, and saw the world the way Cassie now did, one fragile miracle at a time. He brought her coffee at meetings. She brought him old stories about her father's war days. They rarely labeled anything. They didn't have to. On the first warm day of spring, Walter walked, unaided, for the first time since his stroke. It happened in the courtyard behind the hospital, under blooming dogwood trees. Cassie watched from a bench with Logan beside her. Scout trotted faithfully beside Walter's slow, steady steps, ears perked, tail swaying. Cassie wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her denim jacket. "He's stubborn," she whispered. Logan smiled. "Must run in the family." And somewhere beneath the hum of birdsong and breeze, the machines had finally fallen silent, because Walter no longer needed them. In a world that rushes to declare the end, this story reminds us of the quiet strength found in loyalty, in love that doesn't walk away, and in the unseen battles happening beneath the surface. Whether it's a father finding his way back, a daughter holding on when no one else will, or a dog refusing to give up, hope can live in the smallest signs. So if you believe in second chances, in the power of faith, and in the healing that comes through connection, share this story with someone who needs it today. Comment your thoughts below, and if this touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that restore belief in the human spirit. And if you're the praying kind, write amen in the comments. May God bless you and every soul still holding on to hope.